and welcome to Dermbeda's beauty blog, Skinterview. I'm your host, Vanita Sivamani, and I'm here today with cosmetic chemist Susan Raffy. Thank you so much for being with us today, Susan.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we're delighted to have you. And so for our first question, we would love if you could tell us about your background and what drew you to become a cosmetic chemist.
My background is that I have a bachelor's in chemistry. I attended the University of California in San Diego, and I originally started as a pre-med student, and for 4 out of the 5 years that I was at UCSD, I was a pre-med chemistry major with minors in anthropology and Spanish literature. And at the end of the 4 years that I was at UCSD, I had decided that I did not want to pursue a medical career or medical school. So when I graduated, I really did not know what I was going to do with my chemistry degree. So I just started looking around for different positions after I graduated. And I started out in R&D for a pharmaceutical company, and I was there for a short time, and then I became involved in research at the University of Texas in San Antonio, and I was doing a lot of animal surgeries for clinical research and vitamin E assays. I also worked at the Southwest Research Institute in San Antonio, which is a baboon research center. So I was primarily at the beginning of my career, I was in a medical research capacity. And due to a lot of allergies to animal hair, I decided that I needed to try to pursue a different career, but I still wanted to remain a chemist. And so I started looking around while I was still living in San Antonio, and I came across a job at the Dermatological Products of Texas. And I did not get the first job that I applied for there, but I continued to call on an almost weekly basis until I was hired about a year later. And I was hired as a research scientist in their cosmetic product development group. And Aller Cream Cosmetics was the division that I was working in, which is at that time was a division of Alcon Laboratories, which is a pharmaceutical manufacturer. DPT is the manufacturing facility for the personal care and OTC products that were manufactured by Alcon Laboratories, and we were located in San Antonio, Texas, and our parent company was in Fort Worth, Texas. And I was there for approximately 2 years, at which time the division was sold to another company in California. And I ended up moving back to California, but I didn't take a job with the company that purchased Aller Cream Cosmetics. I went to work for a competitor company that's called Physicians Formula Cosmetics, which still exists today. And I started there as a research scientist in the R&D department. I worked on skincare products, a lot of color cosmetics, powders, loose powder, pressed powder, etc. And after that, I left to go to contract manufacturing.
Very neat.
Which is manufacturing products for many different people under many different circumstances. So it was not a branded company. It was a company that made products for other companies to sell.
Terrific. That's really rich experience from so many different perspectives. So very delighted to have you today. And so what would you say are your primary responsibilities as a cosmetic chemist?
Today, I mean, my responsibilities today, because I own and operate a consulting company and also a manufacturing company. And we have here approximately 15 to 20 employees at any given time, depending on how much work we have in the manufacturing facility. But my responsibilities overall are for creating new formulas for customers, that come to us either with an idea, or they may have a product that they're already selling that they're looking to make changes to, or they want to move the manufacturing, or perhaps when they started their projects, they weren't given the opportunity to own their own formula. And at some point they decided that it was in the best interest of their company to own the formulas and own the intellectual property that belongs to their company. And so they would contract with a company like mine to reverse engineer or reproduce an existing product, as well as people that come to us to create completely brand new products. And that may be something with an idea, or they may have one product that they bring to us that they like for the color, the odor, the appearance, but they are looking for the performance of another product. And so we just try to marry the properties that the customer is looking for into the finished product that they're looking for. And then we also, after the formula goes through a stability protocol, microbiological testing, once we've determined that the formula is suitable for manufacturing, at that time, we would also then be able to accept orders for the product, and the customers can then order their own formula from us, or they can take the formula and the manufacturing instructions and go wherever they would like to have it manufactured.
What's the typical timeline from start to finish, from idea to out to the market?
I would say that the average time frame would be approximately 9 months from conception to commercialization. Most of that time is in the back and forth process of research and development. And we will submit, like after we gather ideas and the lab and the customer comes to an agreement on what ingredients that they want in the formula, what they don't want in the formula, what they want it to look like, smell like, feel like, what kind of a package it's going to go in, whether it's going to go in a bottle, a tube, a jar. All of those things need to be taken into consideration, because if a product is going to go into a 1 ounce airless bottle versus a 1 ounce jar, we may be making the product going into a jar thicker than a product going into a bottle. So all of those things are taken into consideration. And then approximately 30 to 90 days is consumed by stability and safety testing. We also send the formula out to be tested for preservative effectiveness, which is a test that determines whether or not the preservative that's been selected for the formula is adequate. And once the product passes that test, then you can proceed to the next steps of actually manufacturing. And I would say, generally speaking, if you try to do that process in less than 9 months, there could be shortcuts that are taken that might not be in the best interest of launching the product. You don't want to discover, 3 to 6 months or even a year after launching a product that all of a sudden you start noticing that there's product separation, color shift, pH drift, the scent of the product somehow either changes or becomes off odor. So there's a lot of those issues are resolved during the stability and the packaged product compatibility testing stages.
Well, thank you. It's great to know what goes behind the scenes on all the products that we see. So thanks for sharing that with us. So what can the chemical composition really tell you about a product?
Well, one of the basic premises of an ingredient listing is that the ingredients that are in the formula are listed on the packaging, whether it's on the label. If it's a smaller packaging component like a lipstick or a mascara, the ingredients may be on what's called the secondary packaging, which is the blister pack or a unit carton, the individual box that the product goes into. However, the ingredients are supposed to be listed in what's called descending order of predominance. So whatever ingredient is in the formula at the highest percentage would be listed first. Typically for most products, that would be the water phase, or you'll see deionized water or water/aqua. Some natural companies may choose to not list water and list something like a plant extract or aloe vera juice. And that process is gone through for each ingredient. So starting with the highest percentage down to the lowest percentage. And where some flexibility comes into play is that any ingredient that's in the formula at 1% or below can be listed in any order that you desire. So something that's in the formula at 1% may not be distinguishable in percentage-wise or quantity in the formula compared to something that may be in the formula at 0.1%. As an experienced cosmetic formulator, I'm usually able to determine where that 1% line occurs. And with that information and my experience with the percentages typically used for some other ingredients that normally fall in that 1% or below range, I'm able to make some very good educated guesses as to what percentage the panthenol or the vitamin E or a peptide may be in a formula. And that's a lot where the artistic part of the product development process comes into play, is knowing what's happening at the 1% or below line, and everything else. And the ingredients that are above that is what I use to determine what type of an emulsion I'm going to be creating. Is it going to be a water in oil emulsion, oil in water, water in silicone? Is it anhydrous, meaning there's no water in the formula, which would be something like a chapstick or a lip balm type formula. So we use all of those little pieces of information along with measuring some specifications of the product, like the pH and the viscosity. Is it water resistant, or does it wash off easily with cool water? Does it require soap and hot water? So those are just the little things that we do to evaluate a product. And from that, we would create a backbone of a formula, produce a first sample, have our customers evaluate it. If we think that it's acceptable to go to the next step, we would send it to our customer along with an evaluation form. And then with their feedback, we would then make the subsequent revisions to make something either more moisturizing, less sticky, more fragrance, less fragrance, change the color, any number of things that affect the aesthetics or the performance of the formula.
It's really fascinating. So what are the things that people should look out for when they're reading the product label?
A lot of ingredient listings can be deceptive or misleading because there could be hundreds of ingredients listed on the back of a package or on a label, but that does not necessarily mean that they're in the formula at any beneficial level or even any therapeutic level, because the reality is there can be an ingredient that is listed on the label and it may be present in the formula at 0.0001%, which for some very potent ingredients, that may be an effective level. But for something like vitamin E or panthenol, those percentages are really insignificant. So the fact that something appears on an ingredient label does not really give you all of the information that you need to make an informed decision about your purchase. And that's why it's important to really know the integrity of the company that you're working with, what their internal policies and philosophies are, so that you can make your purchasing decisions based on more than just what it says on the package, because that is definitely not going to be all of the information that you need when you're comparing products that are on the shelves. And you can't even always use price as a guideline, because I have seen some very economical products that are sold in drugstores and some mass market retailers like Target or Walgreens that can be very elegant and sophisticated formulas, and they're sold at fairly reasonable price points, anywhere from $10 to $20, and they can be really adequate products, especially for the value. And then there are department store products that, or physicians brands that I've seen sold in the hundreds of dollars, and they may be very skimpy on the expensive raw materials, but the fact that it's being sold at a doctor's office implies or confers some sort of prestige. So the products are sold at a higher price point, but that is not always a guarantee that you're getting a better product.
That's good advice. Good to know. So our last question for you is, what are common chemicals that you generally recommend avoiding?
The most common ingredients that we see consumer resistance to are many of the ingredients that I'm sure your audience has read about, and there's been a lot of unfavorable press for whatever reason, sometimes scientifically founded, but not always. Most of the brands that are marketing products where they are discussing ingredients in detail, in today's regulatory climate, things like parabens have fallen out of favor as a preservative. And the theory behind that is that they can be endocrine or an estrogen disruptors in females. Fortunately, we have a lot of preservative alternatives that we work with that are considered greener or more consumer acceptable. So we do have a lot of options to work around the ingredients that people don't want to see in their products anymore. The other category that's not very popular are things that are derived from petrochemicals or animals, such as mineral oil, petrolatum, many other emollients that are petrochemical derived, like isohexadecane. There are many alternatives and replacements for those that are plant derived. So again, I don't have to, if I'm formulating a quote natural product, I don't have to compromise the quality of the product because I'm not including petrochemical derivatives, because I have so many other raw materials that I can choose from that will also create a good formula. Another area that is receiving a lot of skepticism are artificial fragrances, artificial colors. Very recently is the presence of talc following the large class action lawsuit that Johnson & Johnson went through regarding their baby powder. So going forward, I'm just choosing not to use talc just because that was so predominant in the news for so many months that would be something that I would probably recommend if I was formulating products for someone, would be an ingredient I would not want to include. And then I mentioned the animal derivatives, things even like hydrolyzed silk protein. Technically, silk protein is produced by silkworms, and it's a byproduct of their existence. So it's not like any animal, plant, or insect is being harmed, but there's still the perception that it's not plant derived. And so some very, companies that have very, very tight restrictions on their ingredients may go as far as not to want to use something like silk protein. And then hydrolyzed keratin protein is a byproduct of the meat processing industry. And even though there are very well documented benefits to hair and skin, in general, that is another ingredient that we tend to avoid, or class of ingredients that we tend to avoid in formulation. And lastly, I would probably say any type of plant material that may have, even the plant materials have to be screened, because certain plants can have negative or irritating profiles also. Most people, if they're allergic to anything in a product, the most common culprit is fragrance. And so that is why, in general, you don't see fragrance used in eye products or hypoallergenic products. It's just immediately eliminated from the start, because fragrances are responsible for most perceived skin allergies that are caused by product on people's skin.
So you've touched on an interesting point, which we've gotten some questions about. When somebody reads the label natural, what is that actually telling them? And maybe some things to look out for even when it comes to natural labeling.
That's a very good point, because at the present, there's not a federal or in the state of California, any legal definition for the word natural. So whenever you see the word natural on a product, whether it's a food or a personal care product or cosmetic, you have to understand what is the manufacturer or the marketer's philosophy or position or definition, internal definition for the term natural, because there's not a legal definition. One thing that the FDA has cracked down on in the last year and issued warning letters to several marketers is the term all natural or 100% natural. So no matter how natural a formula is, I generally would counsel someone not to use that sort of terminology on their packaging, because in today's regulatory climate, it's definitely a red flag for the FDA, because then you get into the area of a preservative maybe in the formula at 1% or less. But even if it's possible that it could be something that's naturally derived, is that particular raw material actually naturally derived, or has it been biosynthesized or created to be nature identical? And you just are opening yourself up to scrutiny if you use those kinds of claims. And I have several different customers that they will reference on their packaging whether something contains a plant extract or vegetable oil, or we use plant alternatives to things like propylene glycol. And it's just really on a case-by-case basis almost per company what that terminology means.
Well, great. Thank you so much for clarifying that for us and for all your time and advice today. We know how important ingredients and chemicals are when it comes to skincare. So thank you for the work that you do and sharing your time with us today.
Thank you.
And to our viewers, thank you so much for tuning in, and be sure to join us again soon.